thank you for everything you do, and if I forget one of those questions, because there are like 5 or 6, let me know. But all respect and love and admiration to Kathy Kelly. I think maybe Tuesday she's getting out, but wonderful work she does, and you should learn about her if you don't know about her. Of course, I would love to debate him or anyone else. I think debates are a much underutilized format that we don't do enough of. I think they should be thought of not as hostile combat. I think they should be thought of as a way to enlarge the views of all parties, but I would love to do it. I also have a half-hour weekly radio show that's on stations all over the country, talknationradio.org, and they can have it for free if they want it. I think it's a hugely important point that environmental groups, for the most part, the big ones, refuse to take on what is, by numerous measures, the single greatest destroyer of the natural environment, because it comes packaged in war songs and flags and patriotism and militarism. And there are, of course, exceptions, and there are exceptions around the world. And I mentioned that at bases and at islands that the Navy wants to destroy with bombing and so forth, it's become possible to get environmental groups on board in opposing, that particular little bit of militarism. But to get them to oppose the military budget, to get them to ask that some of those hundreds of billions of dollars go into environmental protection rather than war, we've gotten absolutely nowhere, to my knowledge, and we keep trying. I think, the Sierra Club, I work for a number of different organizations, and with one hat I was working with the Sierra Club in collaboration on something that was anti-war and pro-environment, and I proposed a collaboration with them, with an organization that opposes drone murders. And they said, absolutely not. We must support killing people with drones. And then, after dumping our grandchildren's unearned pay into that murderous madness, we'll see if we can still save the environment. That's the general position. And I think the way you go about changing it is by getting your local Sierra Club and your local chapter of all of the big environmental groups on board and lobbying the national one. And that's starting, and there are local chapters of all kinds of environmental groups, including that one that have signed on at worldbeyondwar.org, and we're encouraging them to get the other chapters in the neighboring states and lobby the national. But it's an uphill struggle. But if the civil liberties groups that are upset about torture and assassination and so forth would go after the root cause of military spending, it would be to their advantage. If the environmental groups that are upset about the poisoning of the air and the water and the land would go after the chief culprit who's doing more of it than anybody else, it would be to their advantage. If the groups that care about having resources for human needs of all kinds would go after the biggest waster of our resources, and if all of us did that together, we of course would have enough power to turn the militarism around. But at the moment, that's not where we are.
I have a comment and a question first. Yes, there isn't much being done by environmentalists to reduce the possibility of war. But I know one environmentalist that probably everybody in this room knows, Nick Humphrey. He testifies, he's a meteorologist, testifies for the Maryland Pesticide Council, done a lot of other things in the environment. He surreptitiously taught a course about these public health and the medical consequences of nuclear war. I said to him, Nick, how can you stand it? I can't sit there and think of it. He said, you want to say what you said, Dave? I'll quote me because I forgot. He said, it's like looking at the sun. I couldn't do it every minute, but he taught the course. So thanks to the respect that he's earned for his career, for everything he's done, we are at least making some progress. We have the possible interest of a funder. Dick was thinking about establishing an endowed chair of war and ecology at either Johns Hopkins School of Public Health or whatever. So this is an environmentalist who's, has already done a lot. I tell you what, I'll stop. I have a comment.
Well, if anybody didn't hear, that there's a proposal to create an endowed chair on war and ecology at Johns Hopkins or somewhere else, which is, of course, a wonderful idea. And if they develop a petition campaign or anything else, you all should support it. Yeah.
Oh, by the way, one other thing. The other person who, along with Dick, who's kind of the keystone in this, none of you know who Olivia Fermi is, but you know who her grandfather is, Enrico Fermi. And by the way, Enrico Fermi's wife, Laura Fermi, she noticed that his white shirts in Chicago, this was in the late 40s, would get sooty. So she started an environmental group there. But anyhow, the granddaughter, who was close to Laura, is very active in environmental and nuclear weaponry issues. So she is part of this coalition that Dick is at the center of to establish this endowed chair.
Good, good. Let's try to get as many people. I think there are 2 more people at this table, and then we'll go to another table.
I believe there was a report out of the Department of Defense a few years ago, which hopefully could be used for peace, where they talked about environment causing a lot of instability in the world, increasing the chance of refugees and fighting. I don't know if you remember seeing that. And if so, is there any way we can, anti-war movement can use that, take their own material and use it towards a peace message?
Well, I guess if there are people who believe the so-called Defense Department, that is the War Department, when they don't believe, you know, the scientists with the expertise, then by all means pass along to them that, like the insurance companies, like everybody else with skin in the game, the military recognizes the reality of the environmental crisis. But I think, you know, our proposal has to be to stop preparing to handle the crisis with the very illness that's creating it. Our proposal has to be, I mean, there is this expectation built into the language of many of the leading advocates of environmental protection that environmental disaster leads to war, as if that's some sort of scientific or law of physics. You know, environmental disaster leads to war in cultures that allow and advocate and support war. Right? And so we have to have a massive shift of resources and thinking from preparing for more wars to preparing to mitigate the damage and aid those in need and stop making the problem worse. And so we don't, you know, I don't think we want to glorify the authority of the so-called Defense Department as if it's saying something makes it true. And I don't think we want to get on board with turning the military into a crew for rescuing people from natural disasters and fighting environmental damage and so forth because of the grotesque history of that pretense. The way the military it escalated in Vietnam with the floods as an excuse, and every time there's a disaster in Haiti, it gets occupied by the military and so forth. We have a very bad record with no sign of changing. We need to substitute for the military a national and local and private and international crews of people to do good work as doctors, as human aid, as peace workers, as human shields, as negotiators, and so forth.
I wasn't implying that we should let the military carry out policies based on their study, that people in the peace movement, as yourself and others here, would use that as something that's not from the fringe people, it's from the Defense Department. Maybe couldn't fringe it away.
I think it's more our job to make it understood that they are fringe, that they are unacceptable, that they are radical madmen and women. And I mean, if we can't appeal to the scientists who know the science, if we have to appeal to a bunch of soldiers to convince us of a scientific matter, I'm not sure I'm totally on board, but you know, every audience is different and every individual is different. If there's an individual that works with,
Exactly.
use it.
Exactly.
I was just wondering if you wanted to share with the group any of your observations about your trip to Cuba, in particular how they managed to move forward in the absence of
Yeah, it's interesting that in Cuba, when I went to Cuba back in February, it's interesting that when the Soviet Union collapsed and all the aid ceased in Cuba, and Cuba was in a real hard time, what they now call the special period, very Orwellianly, it was a period of death and suffering. They were driven into developing really leading sources of organic food and organic sustainable farming and local production of food and so forth. And we were down there and met with a number of these farmers who were incredibly impressive and informative. But what we were talking about earlier was that we went and met with the embassy, the U.S. embassy, which they call an interest section, and they're very excited about getting to call it an embassy again, although it's not clear what that changes. And I wanted to ask them about giving Guantanamo back. And the people, the top officials and their aides in the embassy didn't know the facts of the matter, didn't know anything about it. Nobody had ever brought it up, wasn't on their radar screen at all. But they were interested in trade with Cuba, and the State Department was developing this list of items they want to propose allowing into the United States from Cuba. And we asked, look, we can bring rum and cigars, can we bring life-saving medicines? Because Cuba has developed life and limb-saving medicines, a procedure to save people with diabetes from losing their limbs, which happens every day in the United States, but not in countries that use Cuban medicine, various vaccines and other wonderful medicines that Cuban doctors have developed that other countries have approved, but the FDA won't look at because, and so we asked, will medicines be on the list of items to propose allowing into the United States? And the answer was no, absolutely not. I can tell you that for a fact. Well, why not? Well, because they aren't produced by private entrepreneurs. They're produced by the Cuban state enterprise. And so the purpose of allowing more stuff into the United States from Cuba is to encourage privatization in Cuba. It is not to save lives in the United States or to become friends and respect each other or any of that. So we still have a long way to go, but there are positive steps, and the people and the culture of Cuba, of course, are wonderful. Margaret.
Thank you. Margaret Flowers. And one thing I don't hear talked about very much, we talk a lot about our concern about nuclear weapons.
Would you use the mic?
Yeah, use the mic.
One thing that I don't hear us talk about very much, we do talk about the concern about nuclear weapons, but we don't talk about what led up to those weapons, which is the uranium mining and the 10,000 abandoned uranium mines that continue to exist around the United States, that continue to poison primarily indigenous communities and cause cancer and birth defects. And so I'm wondering if this is something that you talk about as you go around the country talking about the legacy of war, or if Physicians for Social Responsibility has concerned about these abandoned uranium mines. And I have to give a disclosure and say that our nonprofit Popular Resistance does have a campaign to clean up the thousands of abandoned uranium mines.
Well, I did not know that, and I'm happy to learn it. And if anybody doesn't know about Popular Resistance and wants to go to popularresistance.org, it is based in Baltimore, and a wonderful organization. You should get involved, and you should get news from it every day. I, of course, am familiar with the issue because I live in Virginia, where there has been a proposal under debate in the state legislature for years now on whether to lift the ban on uranium mining.
They don't really want to mine, they just want to lift the ban in case.
Right, well, it was so unpopular that they decided to go ahead with developing all the details of how they would do it before they legalized doing it. And so they're at that stage where they can flip the switch and start mining uranium in Virginia. And the studies have been done on the enormous health impact that would result in everybody downstream of the Roanoke River, in Tidewater area of Virginia and North Carolina. It would be an absolute disaster. I mean, there's nuclear energy and nuclear weaponry are absolutely disastrous from so many different angles, and we're being sold. There was this There was a film, I called it Pandora's Propaganda. It was called Pandora's Box or Pandora's something. And I mean, there's this push to make nuclear seem green and progressive and peaceful. There is no way, I mean, it's not a good source of energy, and it is an environmental catastrophe, and it is potentially an apocalyptic catastrophe. And the nations, not just Iran, and not just Israel, but the United Arab Emirates and all the little Gulf dictatorships that are getting nuclear energy that have no use for it, are getting it because it puts them close to having nuclear weaponry. And this is a madness that can't be ended with a halfway step. You have to get rid of both types of nuclear. She's been waiting the longest, and then Kevin, and then...
How do you propose cutting military budget and also stopping nuclear weaponry without endangering sort of national security, especially considering it sort of amounts into a global arms race among different countries?
The question is how you cut military spending without, bowing out of the arms race and endangering national security. And this is a common question. I think it's worth understanding, and most people in the United States have no idea, that you could pass a law saying the United States must spend no more than 3 times the next leading country on its military. And it would probably have huge popular support and go through, because people would think, great, we got lots of room to grow the military. And that would result in massive cuts of the U.S. military, because the U.S. military spends as much as the rest of the world put together. Which is why I said if you wanted to cut the U.S. military down to the national average around the world, you would have to cut 99.5% of it. Right? So if you believed in national military defense and you wanted to arm the borders of the United States with missiles and Coast Guard and airplanes and so forth, but stop occupying 175 nations around the globe, get rid of the aircraft carriers, the weapons in space, the nukes, and so forth, it would cut 80 to 90% of the U.S. military immediately. And that would lead to, almost certainly, cuts in other militaries. When the U.S. surrounds China with weapons and China builds more weapons, it's a predictable cause and effect. If the U.S. cut weapons, what would China do? Well, we can't say for sure, but we could try it and find out. Right? And when you understand that the investment in war makes us less safe, that it endangers us, then the whole question goes away. Right? And there are just dozens. If you go to, I have a website called warisacrime.org. If you go to warisacrime.org/less-safe, you find a list of dozens of current and mostly former, just retired, top U.S. officials, generals, the directors of national intelligence, and so forth, admitting that it's all counterproductive. Listen to General Stanley McChrystal. Here I am telling you to listen to a madman when I just advocated against that. But look at what General Stanley McChrystal said about the 10 enemies you produce for every innocent person you kill. And understand that they're killing 27 people for every person they target with the wonderful targeting drone wars. It's counterproductive. A nation like Canada that's trying to follow our militarist footsteps has decades of work to do to generate anti-Canadian terrorist networks to rival those of the United States. A group like ISIS put out a professional 60-minute movie asking the United States to attack it. The United States obliged and attacked it. Its recruitment went through the roof. Why? Because it is very, very popular to be seen as the leading opponent of U.S. militarism in that part of the world. It's extremely popular. That's how badly the United States has made itself hated. So to propose to solve matters with more of the problem, right? This is what Einstein said. You cannot fix the problem with the same stuff that created it. It is a cycle. It's a vicious cycle of madness. So you actually have to try something different. You actually have to try aid and diplomacy and negotiation and ceasefires and arms embargoes rather than more militarism. And you could do it while still having a bigger military than anybody else by far, and putting hundreds of billions of dollars into something useful. That would be a nice step in the right direction.
My name is Kevin Zeese. I'm also with Popular Resistance. I'm a fan of World Beyond War. Right? I've been a fan of World Beyond War since it began in support its mission. I'd urge, first of all, Margaret's question about the uranium mines. Google America's Secret Fukushima. You'll be amazed at this health and environmental disaster. It's massive and unreported. We learned about it a couple years ago and it just blew our minds. But my question is about U.S. culture, the culture of war. I'm reading a book about indigenous history of the United States. And it goes back before the founding of the country. And they describe a U.S. method of, a way of war that the United States colonizers started. And it was a basic terrorism. Killing women and children, elderly people, destroying their food crops, poisoning, and it's continued to the day. With the drone killings, mostly of civilians. The Iraq War, mostly of civilians. Every war, and that's really a military strategy the United States uses and denies. And we have this deep culture that puts that on the pedestal. We have monuments everywhere. We have multiple national holidays praising war. We talk about these war criminals becoming, human rights professors. So there's this deep culture we have to deal with. If you wonder why the environmental movement or the social services movements don't take on war, it's because they look at the politics, they look at empire, U.S. empire, the largest empire in world history, a secret to most Americans, but yet the largest empire in world history, is central to our way of being. It's central to our economy as the massive supplier of weapons and employer. So it's a how do you deal with this cultural reality? When you try to get to a world beyond war, you've got to face up to that very challenging problem.
Yeah, well, lots of great points there. I mean, the military has never forgotten its first love. It names all its weapons for the Native Americans. It has the Redskins cheerleaders come out and do celebrations of its new weapons. I think it is a common argument, maybe second only to, aren't we going to make ourselves less safe, that war is needed to prevent something worse, namely genocide. But when you actually look at what war is, you have to squint very hard to see the distinction between a war and a genocide. Right? Both of them kill huge numbers of people, almost all on one side, almost all innocent people, and most of the genocides are part and parcel of war actions and are generated by wars. So they're cousins, they're not opponents of each other. The distinction is primarily that a genocide is something you can blame on somebody other than the United States or the West. I think that we should bear in mind that popular opinion is not as bad as government policy. It's horrible, but it is not as bad as government policy. And most of these wars are not popular, or they get opposed within a year or two, right? I mean, we have these wars on Iraq and Afghanistan and so forth, and you have at least significant public support at first. And then within a year and a half, you have a huge majority saying never should have done it, it's a mistake. So the reason I wrote a book called War is a Lie, with cataloging all the types of lies, was to be prepared and be able to say no when it mattered. Because once a war starts, it's very hard to end it. You have all the support the troops nonsense. I think a big part of getting out of the war culture is getting people to look at the rest of the world, because Americans talk about the next wars as if that's normal, talk about war as an economic jobs program as if that's not sociopathic. And if you look at the rest of the world and you say, well, if war is human nature, why is 95% of humanity doing it so much less than we are? Right? And so it's possible to show people that there is a different way, and that there are nations that have done away with war, and that the fact that Costa Rica has no military and has no fossil fuel and is using all renewable energy, I mean, it's not an example that can just simply be enlarged, but it's not a coincidence, right? And it's not a coincidence that nations around the globe that don't have this sort of military are beating the United States at health and life expectancy and retirement and happiness and environmental care and education. You have this massive crisis in the United States. Total accumulated student debt, $1.3 trillion. Something students ought to care about. U.S. military spending each and every year, $1.3 trillion. If we could connect those two, I don't think that you have to have everybody says, no, we can't make anyone understand it unless we have a draft. I think leaving school with $50,000 debt is understandable to people. And the fact that the total accumulated debt is the same as what's wasted on this criminal enterprise each year ought to stick in people's minds. Do we have any more time? One. I'll tell you, if you can each ask really short questions, and I'll answer them both at once. Yeah.
Some of the PSR went to Senator Sarbanes. He was a senator. We're the only state that 2 senators voted against the Iraq War. He was against the war. We said, what can be done? And he goes, nothing I can do. Stop it. How do we stop the war from Iran?
Okay, 1 second. Yes? Same question?
I was also going to say that we're going to spend $1 trillion on upgrading the nuclear weapons labs in the next 30 years. $1 trillion.
We don't have
Well,
30 years.
the very interesting thing about Iran is that thus far, the White House and the State Department and public interest and global interest are preventing a war starting. This is not a done deal. This will have to be a constant struggle from here to through the foreseeable future. But you see all of these Democratic partisans and liberal anti-war activists in the United States suddenly making this argument that instead of war, we could negotiate. Let's try diplomacy instead. What if we were to start saying that about all the wars that have bipartisan support? What if we were to start saying that about Iraq and Syria and Pakistan and Yemen and Ukraine? Why only about the one war that the president doesn't want at the moment? Right? So I think we ought to take the example of recognizing that there is always an alternative to war, that it is never the last resort because there are always better options, and apply it to every other case. Yes, I mean, it's not guaranteed that we're going to prevent a war with Iran. We're going to have to keep up that effort to prevent it. But it is at least the one war where anybody of significant numbers is talking about preventing it. And of course, each and every war that the U.S. is involved in, from Afghanistan to Iraq and all the others, was quite easily preventable by similar steps that we're not taking.